So in the last video, we talked a little bit about what homeopathy and touched on the homeopathic remedies and how they're made. We want to talk to you more now about what the healing journey itself looks like, because it's a little bit different than what people would expect or what they hope for, honestly, but the outcome is what we're ultimately looking toward. So the reason I say it's different than what we hope for, not that homeopathy doesn't lead to healing early and consistently. What we hope for, though, is for somebody to be like getting on an elevator where they get in at the ground floor and we want to get to the top. And so we just get on, we push a button, just zoom straight up to the top. Or even an escalator where we get on the bottom and we've got like, it takes a little bit of time and varying, courses of up, but we're still constantly making progress up, right? That would also be great. It's not like that. It's like climbing a mountain. So we tend to see 2 to 3 steps forward and then 1 step back, and another 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back. So we have this sort of progress where, just like climbing a mountain, you are still making progress toward that ultimate goal of getting to the peak, and that peak being what Jody talked about, where we don't have the susceptibility, where your kiddo can have an exposure to a known trigger and not have PANDAS and PANDAS symptoms and just have a typical immune response. That's the peak that we're trying to get to. Even when we have those little steps down, though, we're still getting into that direction toward that ultimate goal, which is that peak where we have the healed susceptibility and we're no longer experiencing symptoms of PANS. This is kind of a challenging thing for some people because, let's be honest, PANS can lead to some trauma for the families who experience it, for the kids themselves. And so, Jody, I want you to share a little bit about your mom experience with dealing with those 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back, and how you learned to embrace those steps back and to let go of the panic and understand that this was just a part of homeopathy and embrace it overall.
Yeah, I struggled with it significantly in the beginning, just because I wasn't prepared. My expectations I didn't have expectations because I didn't know what we were doing. But I would, we got a little ways in, and, Avery eventually hit a remedy where we started to see some significant changes. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, hallelujah, homeopathy is the best thing ever. And she stayed there for a minute and then she regressed backwards. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, we just tried another thing and it's not working. Like, here we are again. And then we made a little change. Actually, we didn't even make a change. We gave her another dose and she got a little better again and hung there for a while. And then she regressed again. And when she got better, I would be like, the highest high, just, it felt so good watching my kiddo come back to me little tiny bits at a time. But then when she regressed backwards, it was the lowest lows for me. It was incredibly triggering. It made me feel like homeopathy wasn't working. And that wasn't the case. It just works a little bit differently. And it just would send me into the, I don't know, like, extreme reactions. Like, my reactions to her regressions were so much more elevated when we were doing homeopathy, because I was dealing with my own post-traumatic stress. But then watching her go back and forth was a lot for me. And so it took me a while to get to the place where I was recognizing that every time she would have a regression, that information about how she was experiencing her symptoms in those regressions was really the information that you needed in order to get her to the next step, or, help me understand how to dose or change a potency or a remedy or whatever it might be. Those steps backwards all included a little tiny step forward in the healing direction. All of those were parts of what healed her. And I think I'm about to go off topic. I'm going to let you go back to what you were saying.
All right. So those 2 to 3 steps forward and 1 step back. Well, I think one of the reasons that 1 step back is so hard for parents and is so scary is because we actually see significant improvements usually with the homeopathy, and like we get relief, and then we want things to just stay that way. And it's so hard. It's almost like when you're doing other types of therapies that don't have the same jumps forward that we can see with homeopathy. You're just still in it and you're still managing it, and you start to finally get some relief, and it's hard to see it come back. But It is, as you said, it is an unavoidable and necessary part of the process, because we need to adjust the remedy to match the kiddo where they are at and with the symptoms that their body is showing. So while we're healing with homeopathy, not only is it climbing a mountain, it's also tending to go reverse order, oftentimes head to toe and the inside out. So top, bottom, inside out, and the reverse order for way symptoms appeared. And so we're having to uncover layers to help them actually heal from symptoms that were either suppressed by medications or supplements, or suppressed by the continuation or the progression of the condition. So we are going to see some old symptoms come back, but they'll be short lasting, and we'll move through them and actually heal them so they can be truly recovered. And truly a thing of the past. And so what Jody was saying is that in that one step back, she had to learn to embrace it and recognize that even though it was hard, it was going to lead to the next layer and next step of healing for her kiddo. We do eventually get to the point that we are not taking steps back, though. That's when we reach the peak. So we get there. It's just a journey to get there. It's ups and downs. It's not linear. I wish it was, but it's not. One of the things that we also want to talk about is responses to remedies as part of that journey, because there's a couple of different ways that our body could respond. If it's not the right remedy, generally nothing happens. So we're not going to see intense side effects. Occasionally, if it's not the right remedy, we could see some additional aspect of susceptibility. So the remedies will never cause something that your child is not susceptible to. It could potentially expose a little bit more of their susceptibility. This is actually really great when we see this, because it gets us a more clear picture of a remedy that will be even more effective. And so we are quite happy when we see this where it's close but not quite right, where we might see a new symptom show up and not see any of the symptoms improve. We know that we've ruled out one remedy and we are significantly closer to a better fit with the remedy. One thing I didn't mention in the last video is that there's over 3,000 remedies that we have information on that we can select from. And so finding that really good fit can take some work. And that's why we have to really spend a lot of time with somebody, really getting to understand all of the details of what's going on with their kiddo, which is, again, one reason why I seem to have had some really great success. And so are the doctors who've gotten to learn from me and learn from my experience, that we're having some really great success with these kiddos. So we talked already about what would happen if it's the wrong remedy. Let's not focus on that, though, because that's not what happens. We tend to see that about 75 to 85% of our kiddos are responding to the remedies that we recommend, usually on the first try, and if not on the first try, within the first few remedies. Occasionally it takes longer. I will be really transparent. Occasionally it does take longer, but most people are responding to the first, second, or third remedy, and most of those people are actually the first remedy. So let's focus on what happens when it's a positive response. Most people are going to just start to feel better. This could take a few days to a few weeks, and it's not going to be all symptoms at the same time. It could be this cluster of symptoms and these others are unchanged, but we're seeing overall improvements specifically in these, or it could be broad improvement of, varying degrees, like 50% here, 30% here. It's not something that's a suppressive treatment, so it's not going to make everything just go away. It's not just covering it up and squashing it down. What we're looking for is reduced frequency, intensity, and duration of symptoms. And we see that every progressive step that we make, we have continued reducing the frequency, intensity, and duration until we get to the point that we've, again, reached that top. So it could take a few days to a few weeks. Some people are really sensitive to homeopathic remedies and can actually start to notice a shift in their symptoms within a few minutes to a few hours of taking a dose. That's rare, though, so don't get your hopes up that that's going to happen for you. A lot of kiddos, it takes days to weeks to really notice the significance of change. There is a chance that people could have what's called an initial therapeutic aggravation. This sounds really scary, and it gets a lot of people hung up on this, because what it means is that the symptoms that you're experiencing could get a little bit worse for a few days. It's very rare that it goes beyond a day or two, and it's a short period of time. It's a short intensification or worsening of symptoms followed by significant improvement. It's actually a really good sign, because it's showing the body has a really robust reaction to a remedy. We do take a lot of steps to make sure that we reduce everything we can to identify if somebody has a tendency to aggravate. And if they do have a tendency to aggravate, we adjust our dosing strategies. So we are dosing less frequently, diluting it in more water, and giving water doses to sort of ease the likelihood of aggravation. Because I'll be really transparent, kiddos who have PANS or PANDAS are more sensitive than the general population. So about 30% of them tend to aggravate, and it's still by no means a majority that tend to aggravate. When they do aggravate, though, we do take significant measures to reduce that so that we can limit the impacts. That being said, the aggravation is a positive response, so we don't interfere with it. We allow it to settle down and then move forward. And I'm going to pause here and hand it over to Jody, who has had to deal with aggravations left and right with her kiddo. And she started early enough with me that she actually helped me figure out some of the ways to mitigate the aggravations for these kiddos. So Jody, can you share the mama experience on dealing with aggravations?
It took me a very long time to see aggravations for anything other than something that was frustrating me. I struggled with them for a while um, because I felt like I was giving Avery something that was making her worse, which felt wrong. Um, Getting a ways into the healing journey, and especially where I sit now, being able to look back at the entire journey, like I can clearly see that all of those aggravations again were one tiny little baby step in the direction of Avery being healed. One thing I am sure about is when we're healing the body, we cannot go around. We have to go through all of these symptoms. We have to go through what our kids' bodies need to do to heal, and what
Mhm.
Avery's body specifically needed was or didn't need, but she was sensitive to the remedies, and so these aggravations happened. um Again, post-traumatic stress triggering, so my responses were a little bit extra during them. But once we got a ways down the road, I realized that each time she was coming out of an aggravation, she was coming out a teeny tiny bit better. And her baseline after these aggravations, which was a slight elevation in the symptoms that we were giving her the remedy for, but then it would take a couple of days, and each day she would get better. And then the aggravation would be over. She'd be at her new baseline. But as more aggravations were happening, her baseline started to change, and I was like, oh, like, what's the next one going to look like? What's the next one going to look like? Because they were either like less symptoms, or what was really cool is when they started to stretch out and get longer and
Mm.
longer. Like the first one was a day, the next one was like 2 days. And then eventually we got to the point where it was like 4 months and 6 months. And
Mhm.
aggravations are, I mean, the healing journey in general, the regressions and the aggravations are very hard. They're not harder than what you're already doing. You are already in it. You are already doing these hard things. You're already managing. Um, Doing it in the name of healing makes a lot more sense to me. These things are absolutely doable by every single one of us to get our kid to healed. It is so very worth it. And if you ask the moms that have been in it longer, they'll tell you those aggravations don't scare them at all. You armor up, you manage for a couple of days, and then you walk out of it a little bit better. So I know they seem scary in the beginning, but it's something that you get used to and really like almost get excited about, because it
We
means
have
it's a
moms who
good
celebrate. Yeah.
response. Yeah.
Yeah, we have moms that celebrate aggravations now because they know that it means that their kiddo is going to get significantly better on the other end of the
Yeah.
aggravation. Um, so one thing that people ask us regularly is, how does homeopathy work with other types of healthcare? We've talked about the differences between allopathic and functional medicine, and the approach that they take, where functional medicine is doing more of a forcing of the biochemistry, whereas conventional medicine is trying to suppress and kill the infection and suppress the inflammation. With homeopathy, you can use those other therapies. They're not going to interfere with each other. So one's not going to make the other more ineffective per se. The goal, obviously, is to get you not only off of all of the other medications and supplements, but to also not need homeopathy in the long run. Like, homeopathy is a healing therapy. Like, we get to that top of the mountain and you don't need us anymore. Our job is to work ourselves out of a job. And so you can work with them at the same time. We don't recommend that you make changes to multiple things at once, because we need to be scientific about this, right? We need to be able to know what is doing what. We don't want your kiddos taking a remedy that's not effective, or a medication that's not effective or potentially making them worse, or a supplement that's not effective or potentially making their symptoms worse. So we do ask that if you are working with us, that you only make one change at a time. If you're coming in already on a lot of supplements and medications, we can consult with you to help you understand how to wean off of them when the time is appropriate. But we typically like to see that we have some clear improvements and sustained improvements on the homeopathic remedies before we start making those changes. So we're not going to be coming in and adding a ton of those things. In fact, our job is to try and get you off of all of those things. Same thing with dietary changes. It's not our area of focus for multiple reasons. We do obviously think that you need to eat a healthy diet because that is going to help everybody feel better, to have low inflammatory diet, eating highly nutritious foods that are low processed and not really very inflammatory. That being said, we know these kiddos and they have very restricted diets anyway. And if your kiddos they're not the kids that like they'll eventually get hungry enough that they'll eat what you give them. They're not those kids. They will end up in the hospital with an NG tube because they're not going to eat, because it's not stubbornness that's keeping them from doing it. It's fear. It's a very real thing. So not only do we not want to potentially create more OCD or ARFID in these kiddos by putting them on a restricted diet, we also don't want to make anything more limited for them, and they are already having a hard time going to school, having a hard time socially, and we're not going to put a more restricted diet on them. It just doesn't work. It's not to the benefit. What we do see is that generally when kids are feeling better, they tend to be more accepting and receptive to healthier foods, and so those shifts into a healthier diet kind of happen organically. We do make recommendations occasionally when we get to a point where a kiddo is maybe just in the stubborn place of pushing back. But again, we always want to make sure that we take the totality, the person as a whole, into consideration and not follow really strict or rigid diets. We're not going to take you off of a really strict or rigid diet either. If you've got something that's working for you, like, we're not here to change that. We're here to give recommendations for homeopathy and have that work with what you're already doing. We're not medication pushers, and we're not anti-medication people either. So we're happy to talk with you about pros and cons about things. This is one advantage of working with a medically trained homeopath rather than somebody who is a lay homeopath. And we'll talk more about what it looks like to work with a provider in our next video. But working with somebody who's medically trained can actually give you a lot more information about the other things that you're working on, even if it's not what they're managing. If there's somebody else that's managing it, they can still give you some education in how it works with the homeopathy, which can be really beneficial. Jody, I know you wanted to say a little bit about this aspect because it was an important component for you, because you came to start with homeopathy on a bucket full of medications and supplements and on a really strict diet.
Yeah. And we weren't even on the amount that some folks are on, but it was really, there's so many things that homeopathy, it just made our lives easier. It was really, really nice once we got to the point where Avery was starting to get some symptom relief and resolution. And I actually came to you first, I think, and was like, okay, like, what does it look like if we start weaning off this, weaning off that? And eventually we were off of everything other than a multivitamin. And it's so nice not to do that. Like, keeping up with all the supplements is just straight craziness. Getting a kid to take those pills, keeping up with times a day, everything like that. That was really neat. But I think what's even cooler to me is the whole food allergy aspect of it, and what has changed in Avery. So she's gone from being allergic to, gluten and dairy and multiple other things, and having these really like behavioral type responses to foods and itching and GI stuff and all the things, to now she can eat all of those foods. Obviously I don't feed them to her all the time because they're inflammatory foods, but she can go to a birthday party and have a piece of pizza and a cupcake and just be a normal kid and eat those things, and she has no immune response to them whatsoever. That's a really big deal to her, to just be like the other kids. That's such a, like, homeopathy gave that gift to her.
Yeah, and that's another reason we don't really focus on really strict diets, other than like, let's look at whole foods as much as we can, healthy, nutritious foods, is because homeopathy, with that addressing the susceptibility, can address susceptibility to allergens, including food allergens. It can address gut integrity issues, when you've got like leaky gut or something else that's contributing to higher sensitivities to food. So this is something that homeopathy can address and allow the occasional thing to come up and not have it derail you. And when we really rely on strict diets to keep things under control, one misstep and everything can fall apart. Another question that frequently comes up is the length of time that people would want to expect to work with a homeopath to get to that peak of that mountain for that full recovery. Most people, are working with us with regular follow-ups for about 18 to 24 months, but it does vary from person to person. Some people are with us longer and need more work to get to that point where they are only needing as needed follow-ups. Some people it's shorter because they just have a simpler, more straightforward case, or they have a really robust response to homeopathy. People who do tend to start with homeopathy first tend to be on the shorter side, because the reality is our body reacts to the medications and the supplements that we take because they're not benign. And so when we have a lot of medications and supplements, we're dealing with the internal, that susceptibility, and we're dealing with the response that the body has to any medications that have been used. So changes to the microbiome, changes to neurotransmitter balance and hormone balances that have been forced by the medications or supplements. So it can take a little bit longer when we need to untangle all of that, in addition to addressing the susceptibility. Ultimately though, Jody, I mean, you kind of already expressed this, but it's worth it in the long run. I can tell you from my own personal experience, it took me about 5 years to get to fully recovered. But I'm there, I'm fully recovered. I meet no diagnostic criteria for anything I have previously made a diagnosis for. I obviously was a lot older when I got started and had been on a lot of medications and had a lot of things going on. So I was on the longer end. It took me about 5 years total before I was done. Jody had a lot less time, that had to deal with that with her kiddo. But you're also that mom who is just like, you're all in on homeopathy. So we still consult every once in a while on like the little things that come up for day-to-day life too.
Yeah. And looking back now, like grand scheme of things, the amount of time that it took to get Avery to where she was good was, I mean, so short, and so worth it. And, I think the most important thing to remember is that homeopathy is not a sprint. We don't expect that we're going to hop in and just symptoms go away. We don't want to suppress symptoms. We want to allow our kids' bodies the time that they need to heal. And we are there to be supportive through the process. It's hard for us, lots of ups and downs, emotional up and down for mom and dad. But you really, you just have to keep your end goal in sight. And our goal is to not be having to deal with the food allergies, not be having to deal with all of the supplements, not stuck in the symptom merry-go-round and doing this forever and ever. Our children having a better quality of life is 100% worth going through this journey and the struggle that is involved with healing the body.
All right, and on our next video, our last video, we're going to talk to you about working with a provider and a little bit of information about testing, because that question comes up a lot too. So we'll see you guys there.